Chapter 2701. Daisy brought them upstairs, and the first thing that caught Colton's attention was the scene of Nalace changing the baby's diaper. He sneered. What a rare thing to see. Freya mocked him in return. He looks much more competent than you when you first started picking up this chore. Colton was at a loss for words. Cameron walked up to the babies with Waylon. Her belly was so big now that she could no longer bend down, so she could only squat halfway down on the side of the bed and hold the baby's little hand. It's so soft, and it's such a tiny hand. This feels amazing. Daisy stared at her belly. Cameron, how many months has it been? She stroked her belly. It's been 22 weeks. Brother, how many are you expecting? Waylon chuckled. You're welcome to guess. Freya guessed there would be 3, and Daisy had the same thought. Colton said, you ladies are making it sound like conceiving triplets is a normal thing to do. How would there be so many triplets? It's at most twins. Nalace nodded. Daisy was puzzled. What if they're also triplets? Colton smiled. This miracle has already happened. Cameron and Waylon looked at each other, smiled, and said nothing. The others were to guess, so it was not the time to reveal the answer just yet. Another 3 days passed. At the Goldman mansion, Maisie and Nolan each held one baby, and Daisy had the last one in her arms. Nicholas walked up to Nolan's side and teased the baby boy in his embrace, and the baby grabbed Nicholas's finger, amusing him. Look at you, Daisy. You're now a proud mother who's given birth to 3 heirs for the Knowles in one go. Nalace took the baby out of Daisy's arms. That's indeed something to be proud of. Maisie chuckled. Nolan frowned. How do you tell these 3 apart? Who's this in my arms? The youngest, the eldest, or the one in the middle? After hugging him for such a long time, he still did not know how to distinguish one from another. Nicholas was also slightly stunned. I can't tell the difference either. They really look exactly the same. Nalace explained, the one that you're holding is the eldest, and the one in Mom's arms is the youngest. Daisy was astonished and turned to stare at him. How do you tell the difference? Even I can't tell the difference as a mother. Nalace rubbed the top of her head. All of them were marked when they were born. I've been observing all 3 of them very carefully in the past few days, and I realize that they differ in size and hair color. The eldest looks more buff, so he's a little heavier when you carry him. He shares the same hair color as the second, but the latter is not as heavy as his elder brother. As for the youngest, he's the easiest to tell apart. He's the smallest in size when placed next to his elder brothers, and the color of his hair is lighter. With Nalace's explanation, it was really easy for the other 4 people present to distinguish the triplets from each other. Nicholas smiled and took the eldest brother out of Nolan's arms. Oh, it's true. This chubby boy is indeed heavy. Daisy looked at Nalace. Nalace, if it weren't for you, I'd still have no idea who's the eldest among them. I'm such a clumsy mother. Nalace smiled dotingly. It seems that I'll have to pay more attention to what they wear in the future so that my wife won't have a hard time recognizing them. She nodded. Yes. In the next few days, Nalace began to order a batch of clothes for infants. Although the clothes of the triplets had the same style, there were minor differences. For example, the eldest's clothes would have a small sun mark, the clothes of the second child would have a crescent moon mark, and those that belonged to the youngest would have a star. Daisy lay beside the babies and watched with a grin on her face. The more I look, the cuter they become. Nolachi tucked her long fringe behind her ears. It's time to come up with nicknames for the babies. She froze for a moment, then sat up. Are you really leaving it up to me? He smiled. Yes. For real? Nolachi raised his eyebrows. Daisy gave it a thought and then said solemnly, how about number 1, 2, and 3, straightforward and easy to remember. Chapter 2702. Nalace was rendered speechless. Or Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. These sound a little more systematic. Nalace was at a loss for words. After a long time, he took a deep breath and pinched the bridge of his nose. I think we should skip the naming for now. We'll come back to it someday in the future. There was 1 more week until the 20th, which was Colton and Freya's wedding date. Daisy originally thought that the babies would be born after the wedding, but she did not expect the due date to be pushed forward. However, after unloading the goods, everything was a lot easier. Freya and Colton's wedding ceremony would be taking place outdoors, and the weather forecast claimed that the weather on that day would be clear and warm, which was very suitable for an outdoor ceremony. It was also said that the style of the ceremony was Moroccan. With a site of 20,000 square feet, it was natural for the scale of the event to be grand. After resting for a few days, Daisy went out with Nales to accompany Colton and Freya to try on their wedding clothes. The wedding gown was of a high-end brand, and it took the designer 3 months to make it according to Colton's requirements and Freya's measurements. The silk wedding gown had a bare back style, the back was made out of semi-transparent lace, and the full shirt was like an inverted umbrella that hung over her waist, with its hemline draping just above the ground. Its form was simple, elegant, and not very cumbersome. It had a veil and a crystal tiara, which made it look even nobler and more beautiful. Daisy gently pushed her forward. Freya, go on and try it out. All of us want to see you in the wedding gown, especially Cole, am I right? After saying that, she glanced at Colton. Colton cleared his throat. Nobody needs any clarification from you. Freya went in to try on the wedding gown. When she appeared in front of everyone in the wedding gown, Daisy walked over. As expected from Cole, it really suits you very well. It looks so pretty. Colton scoffed. Of course. Nales wrapped his arms around Daisy's shoulders. Okay, let's wait outside. I think Coleman doesn't want anyone disturbing this moment now. Daisy was taken out of the fitting area by Nales, and she turned her head around every step of the way. But I want to see it. He smiled. What's there to look at? You can see as much as you want when it's our turn. Freya walked down the steps holding her skirt, and Colton took her hand. Are you happy with the design? She nodded with a grin. Yeah, it's a narrow pass. Colton picked up the crystal tiara and placed it on for her. She froze slightly and lifted her gaze. Colton also looked at her with waves of happiness surging from the very bottom of his eyes. Are you looking forward to the ceremony, Your Highness? She was amused and wrapped her arms around his neck. I think I'll never get used to you uttering such words. Colton grinned. I think someone is looking to be taught a lesson again. Tell me now, are you looking forward to it or not? Freya hugged him, rested her chin on his shoulder, and chuckled. Yes, I am. Thank you. What she said was sincere. While Daisy and Nales were waiting for Freya and Colton in the lounge of the bridal store, she received a call out of the blue from Zephyr, whom she had not contacted for a long time. Owner. She hesitated. Seeing the caller ID, Nales gave off a smile. Go ahead. Only then did Daisy answer the phone call. When the call ended, Daisy remained silent for a few seconds and said, Nales, I wish to meet him. Nales responded with a hum. I'll take you there. She nodded. Nales sent her to a cafe and waited for her in the car, watching as Daisy entered the premises. Daisy walked into the cafe and soon saw Zephyr. He sat at a table near the window. He seemed to have lost his former vigor and looked a lot more depressed and thinner. She walked up to the seat across from him. Zephyr, you said you want to meet me. Yeah. Zephyr clasped his hands, interlocking his fingers, placed them on the table, and lowered his gaze. I heard that you've given birth to triplets, congratulations. Chapter 2703. Daisy was stunned for a moment but still accepted his congratulations with a smile. Thank you, Daisy, I'm very sorry about everything that happened in the past. Zephyr's eyes moved. I must have let you down after all these years, whether it's back then or now. I never knew what I wanted all this while and what I have done while trying to find out what it was. Daisy stared at him for a while. Zephyr, everything that happened is in the past now. You can still choose now, can't you? He paused for a long time, then gave off a faint smile. Yeah, you're right. However, many things have changed, and there's no turning back now. He seemed to be connoting something. Daisy thought of someone. Is it Leah? He did not respond to her question. Zephyr, I hope you'll get to live a good life. Even though some things have changed, life still goes on. Whether it's you or Leah, I truly hope that you both can be well and find your own happiness in life. Zephyr raised his gaze and stared at her. His lips then moved slowly. Thank you. She chuckled and added, actually, sometimes I miss those days when we were still studying back in school. You, Leah, and I, and of course, Coleman and Wayne. That will always be one of the happiest times in my life. Zephyr pursed his lips and said after a long pause, Daisy, I've been thinking about it a lot recently. It's really time to let go of some things. She was startled. He lowered his gaze. I've always stayed closely attached to an illusory and beautiful bubble, and I was reluctant to break it no matter what happened. Later, I realized that all those attachments were only my one-sided, wishful thinking. It's time to bid my past self goodbye. Daisy gave off a smile. After saying goodbye to Zephyr, she got back in the car. Seeing that she was in a good mood, Nalace squinted. What did he say to flirt with you? Daisy looked at him and said with a grin, he said a lot. He frowned. Daisy leaned closer to him and whispered, there's no need for you to be wary of him anymore. You'll have no love rival from now onward. Nalace laughed out loud, leaned forward, and gave her a peck on the forehead. I don't think anyone in this world would have the ability to be my love rival. Because she's already mine. Meanwhile, James was forced by his father to go on a blind date. He leaned into the back of the couch and crossed his legs. Father, you're asking me, an A-tier actor, to go on a blind date. Are you looking down on me? Looking at his flippant appearance and attitude, Jefferson angrily threw the newspaper aside. You should take the interrogative tone out of the sentence. I can assure you that I'm indeed looking down on you. Can you name me a few A-tier artists doing as badly as you? You don't even have a girlfriend at this age. You keep on saying that you're a star. You're definitely embarrassing and dragging the whole industry down with you. James was rendered speechless. I'll give you another 2 years. If you're still not married after 2 years, let alone the Tells Group, I'd rather Edamame inherit everything that I'll be leaving behind. I won't leave you a single cent. The white Samoyed laying languidly next to James's feet, which was named after the edamame beans, barked. James dragged Edamame to his side and patted it. Edamame, your father said that he'll leave everything to you. You'll become a filthy rich dog in the future. I think I'll have to stick to you for the rest of my life. Jefferson was so exasperated that he did not want to talk to his son anymore. Okay, it's just a blind date, isn't it? I'll go. James did not plan to really piss off his father. Jefferson was stunned for a split second. Are you serious? James picked his ear. I'll make myself clear first. I'll only attend the blind date if the girl is my cup of tea. And apart from being good looking, she has to also be mature, kind, and self-reliant. I don't want a girl who will cry about every matter. I'm an actor, so I'll most probably be away for a few months every time I get a new role. So, if the girl is someone very clingy, I don't think it'll be possible for me to live with her. Chapter 2704. Jefferson had a straight face but did not say anything more upon seeing that his son had agreed to his arrangement. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., I'll arrange for you two to meet. The next day, in a high-end restaurant, James stepped into the private room wearing sunglasses. Seeing that there was no one there, he took off his sunglasses. What the hell is going on here? Is she kidding me? Since she can't even be punctual, then there's no need for me to wait for her. James turned around and was about to leave, but a woman appeared out of nowhere behind him, shocking him. The woman had a neat shoulder-length haircut and wore a white low-necked silk gown, a printed blue silk scarf, and a pair of loose straight-fit jeans. Her attire looked simple and clean as she did not have any extra jewelry on, apart from a watch and a crocodile leather handbag. James was stunned for a moment. She looks rather familiar. Aren't you going in? The woman walked past him and entered the private room. James returned to his senses and hurried in. Have we met somewhere? You look quite familiar. Jazelle pulled out the chair, sat down, and did not answer his question directly. I know that the other party attending this blind date is you, so I've come to talk to you. James stared at her, trying to think where he had met her before this. It seems like somewhere last year. Mr. Tell, don't you want to sit down? James took his seat and crossed his arms. Is this the attitude that you should have when you're here on a blind date? Are you here on a blind date or a business meeting with me? Jazelle scoffed. Otherwise, what kind of attitude do you expect from me? Most people attending a blind date don't come willingly, do they? Seeing that she was quite a self-aware woman, James cleared his throat. That's right. I wouldn't even be here if my father hadn't been pushing me so hard. Then allow me to give it to you straight. I don't expect to get myself a date out of this meal. I only need someone who can coax my father. It'll be even better if you can fool him into believing that we've gotten together after this. You're a smart woman, so you should know what I mean. You're asking me to work with you and pretend to be your girlfriend to fool Mr. Tell, am I right? Yes, exactly. James nodded. It seems that this woman isn't too dumb at all. Jazelle leaned back in the chair. That's exactly what I aim to get out of today. James was a little confused. I need a fake husband. We don't have to make our marriage public. I only need my family to know about it. As for our marriage certificate, I can get someone to forge it for us. As for you, all you need to do is go home with me and have dinner with my family from time to time. Apart from that, you can do whatever you want during the rest of the time. Oh, one more thing, you can't have any scandals with other women within these 3 years. James was slightly taken aback. A fake husband. She nodded without any hesitation. James laughed out loud abruptly. Why would you come to me if what you want is a fake hus? Aren't you an actor? He was utterly speechless. Jazelle propped her hand against the side of her forehead and gave off a faint smile. Otherwise, why would I have come to meet you? You're an actor, which just meets my requirements. Playing a fake husband will give you room to showcase your skills. The corner of James's lips twitched. How could you sound so contemptuous? If I can have your word, I'll try my best to help the Tells in the future. You can consider this a cooperative relationship. So, what do you say? James narrowed his eyes. Who knows if you're trying to fool me? If this is indeed a scheme, won't I stay married for the rest of my life? Jazelle took a deep breath and took a contract out of her handbag as if she had anticipated this outcome. The terms listed in this contract are legally valid. If you worry that I'll make a fool out of you, we can sign this contract that will be in effect for 3 years. After that, we'll both go back to being single. James had nothing to say because she had even prepared the contract. Chapter 2705. After thinking about the terms for a while, a hint of slyness flashed across James's eyes, and he leaned forward. If it's going to be a fake marriage, then, do I need to fulfill my obligations as a husband? Jazelle choked on her own words and restrained her expression. You don't have to do so. He smirked and picked up the pen. Deal. I was worried that you wouldn't be able to hold yourself back and throw yourself at me someday. I'm a public figure, so where would I go if that were to happen? Jazelle was at a loss for words. He's quite an overthinker, isn't he? After James left his signature on the contract, Jazelle signed it too. James looked at the contract. There isn't any official stamp here. This might seem to be. Before he could finish speaking, Jazelle took a lipstick out of her handbag, wiped it on her thumb tip, pressed it against the paper, and then handed the lipstick to him. James took a deep breath, nodded, and also left his fingerprint on the contract. She then broke the lipstick. James frowned. Jazelle sorted out the documents. Well then, Mr. Tell, I look forward to our happy cooperation in the next 3 years. After saying that, she got up and left instantly. From the beginning to the end, she was the one who had the initiative, while he was completely passive. After she left, James sat alone in the private room and laughed out of anger. This woman, wait a minute. I don't even know her name yet. Forget it. She knows mine anyway. Even if I don't look for her, she'll come to me eventually. Jazelle walked to the parking lot and received a call from her father. Gordon asked her how the date went. She remained silent for a while before replying with a smile, Dad, don't worry. We had a good talk, and I have a good impression of him. Gordon breathed a sigh of relief. That's good. The Tells, heir didn't have a very good reputation back then, but what's great about him is that he's never had any scandals ever since he stepped foot into the entertainment industry. I think he's rather clean and pure in that sense. And we mustn't ignore the fact that he's changed a lot in the past year. She chuckled. Indeed. By the way, the second heir of the Goldmans is going to hold a wedding ceremony in a few days, and Mr. Goldman has invited our family to the ceremony. Do you want to? Nah, I have something else to do a few days from now. You can go with Mom. Gordon sighed. Okay, I won't force you to come with us. However, besides working, remember to take good care of your health too, understand? I know. Thank you, Dad. After hanging up the call, Jazelle drove away. The wedding ceremony arrived as scheduled, and it took place in a venue set up on a landscape surrounded by maple forests. The lake water under the water fountain rippled and looked crystal clear. Everything went well with the caramel-colored tones of the entire wedding scene, and the view was absolutely unmatched. The venue felt cozy and warm because of its retro color palettes, making it look more reserved than a bright-colored outdoor wedding. The combination of the caramel tone and the Moroccan design style looked romantic and delicate, making the whole ceremony look like a scene straight out of a movie. Inspired by the classic arches in Moroccan architecture, metal bars that had been bent into the shape of semicircular arcs could be seen all around the venue, turning them into the core structure of the entire background arrangement and decoration. The hollow iron decorations also made the lake and fountain behind it part of the background too. The passage leading to the center of the stage was covered with an intricate and long carpet, replacing a traditional path usually paved using flower petals. The hundreds of seats in the ceremony area were not of a single aesthetic but a variety of wooden chairs, modern chairs, and couches. There were even pastry, dessert, and fruit stations that supplied the guests with snacks. Brass glass chandeliers and rattan chandeliers were hung on a metal frame together with curtains and tassels. Decorations of different materials were all placed together, creating an overall visual effect that was rich and three-dimensional. The on-site floral design used reeds as the background, which set off the bright and passionate flower arrangements, and colorful vases that could be seen everywhere were also one of the typical features of a Moroccan-style site arrangement and decorations. Chapter 2706. The entrance toward the passageway was decorated with a flower arch. There was a DIY oil painting at the reception, which blended in with the venue's colors. It was very pleasant. Even the welcome card was made from leather. It was unique and classy. The guests who entered were all mesmerized. The Goldmans and Brandon stood at the reception to greet the guests. Colton was the man of the hour, the groom. He was in a full white suit, making him look taller. Our brother, the groom, is so handsome today. Daisy and Nalace walked over. Colton smirked and gave her a bag of candy. You're so sweet. Daisy took the bag of candy, smiled, and put the bag away. I'm going to see Freya. She walked into the tent. Freya sat in the tent while getting her outfit together. The makeup artist was working on her hair. Daisy poked her head in. Freya, you're here. Freya smiled. Daisy walked over and sat down next to her. They said that all the brides would feel very nervous. Do you? I'm all right. She took a deep breath. I feel like I'm in a dream. This is a dream. It's really happening. Daisy looked at her and smiled happily. I'm so happy to see you getting married. Both my brothers have found happiness. That's perfect. I thought you would be the first to get married. Freya turned to look at her and chuckled. I didn't think that we would go first. Daisy was the first to start dating. Waylon was the first to get married, and Colton was the first to have a child. They didn't follow the traditional sequence of events. At that moment, Colton walked into the tent with two people. Freya, who was getting her makeup done, turned around. When did you get here? Leia replied, yesterday. Norman scratched his head. This is our first time in Zelakavia, and we almost got lost in Bassburg. My uncle sent Donnie to come and get us. Mr. Lancel isn't here. He's here with Professor Merlin. Donnie went to pick them up. Freya immediately introduced. This is the youngest of the Goldman siblings, Daisy. I'm sure you've seen her. Leia and Norman looked at each other and smiled. Of course we have. She's the princess. Daisy was a little shy and shook their hands. Just call me Daisy. Outside, Mr. Lancel, Donnie, and Professor Merlin all showed up together. Donnie was pretty famous internationally, so when he showed up with two friends from overseas invited by the bride, it made things even better. Brandon and Nalace went to greet them. When Mr. Lancel and Professor Merlin saw Nalace, they were surprised. Your Highness, they didn't know who Freya was marrying and didn't expect it to be a Goldman. That was why Nalace was there. Nalace smiled. There's no need to be so formal about this. You must be tired from traveling. You can go rest in your seats. The two older men nodded and went inside. The Butchers and the Lucases bumped into each other. When Riley saw that Barbara was frowning, she couldn't help but laugh. I'm really good at guessing, ain't I? Shut up. Barbara lost her bet because Daisy gave birth to triplets and was too angry to speak. Chapter 2707. Riley chuckled. Let's do it again. Wayne's this time. I don't believe that I'll lose again. I'm going to bet on twins again. I'm still betting on triplets. Barbara said, $2,000. Riley's eyes shone. That much. She then leaned over to Helios. "'Cause, aren't you going to hold your wife back?" He chuckled. "I'm betting $20,000. Riley was too stunned to speak. Lewis looked at him. "I'm on my wife's side, so I'll match your $20,000. Helios replied, "Well, if we're putting in that much, we might as well throw in the gender too." Lewis and Riley both paused, then agreed. Deal. After they talked about it, Lewis and Riley decided it would be 2 boys and 1 girl, while Helios and Barbara guessed they would be twin boys. Waylon and Cameron watched them place their bets, looked down at her belly, and laughed. "You're going to have to give birth quietly." Cameron leaned on his shoulder and smiled. "If it's going to make us money, I'll have a baby each year and make a soccer team. We'll be rich." Waylon smiled and kissed the top of her head. "I don't want you to go through so much pain." The wedding was about to start, so everyone got in their seats. The live orchestra started playing, and the MC started his speech. Soon, it was the bride's entrance. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Freya walked on the red carpet while holding a bouquet with one hand and Brandon's arm with another. Colton stood up straight and watched her take each step closer to him. Finally, he took her hand over from Brandon, and she stood next to him. The MC congratulated them. Then the couple made their vows. For richer or poorer, in sickness and health, till death do us part. Then they exchanged rings. Everyone clapped and started chanting. Kiss, kiss, kiss. Colton tilted her face up and gave her a kiss. Brandon was both happy and gratified to see that, and it made his eyes turn red. Dee, who was sitting next to him, asked, "Grandpa, Aunt Freya is getting married. Why are you crying?" He wiped his tears away and smiled. "They're happy tears. Shouldn't you smile when you're happy?" she asked. Brandon turned to look at her and patted her head. "Sometimes, we cry when we're happy. You'll understand when you're older." Dee nodded. Daisy leaned on Nalace's shoulder. Waylon and Colton are finally married. Nalace held her hand and kissed her. "It's our turn soon," she smiled. "We're not in a hurry." After the ceremony, the Goldmans invited the guests to the open-air dining area for their meal. The guests were able to enjoy the view of the maple forest. Freya changed into a different gown and started making the rounds to greet the guests with her father and the Goldmans. The wedding was filled with cheers and laughter until the evening. Daisy walked outside for some fresh air and saw a drone fly overhead. She paused and turned back to see Nalace and the few children controlling it. She walked over and placed her hands on Beatrice and Dee's shoulders. "What are you doing?" Beatrice smiled, watching the drone fly around. "Uncle Nolly is really good at this." Dee was still mesmerized. "This small thing is able to capture the view." "Yes." Daisy nodded. Nalace handed the remote to them. "Want to give it a try?" Chapter 2708. "Yes." Beatrice took it. "Dee, I'll teach you after I learn how." Dee nodded. "Okay." Cameron and Waylon walked over. "I heard that we will have a barbecue later. Why do I have to be pregnant now? I can't eat any of that." She was craving so badly. Daisy smiled and said, "You can have freshly barbecued meat. Get my brother to make them for you. It would be fresh and healthy. But don't have too much of it. It will be a problem if you catch a fever. Just have some to stop the craving." Cameron was overjoyed to hear that. "Really?" She then looked at Waylon. "Make some for me tonight." Waylon saw how badly she was craving the food and was afraid that she might start crying, so he nodded. Sure, I'll personally make them for you. The night fell, and the lights on the patio were switched on. There was barbecue, great food, and wine. The children were playing and laughing. Waylon turned into Cameron's personal chef and placed the freshly barbecued meat on a plate. He added cherry tomatoes and mint leaves as decorations so it looked delicate and pretty. Cameron beamed. It looks beautiful. Waylon poured a glass of freshly pressed apple juice to go with the meat. You can only have food from this plate. That meant that she wouldn't be able to have any of the other barbecued dishes. She bit the fork, but there was nothing she could do. She could only have some, so she stopped craving. Outside, Nolan and Nalace were barbecuing while Daisy and Freya helped. The children, Maisie, Barbara, and Riley sat together while enjoying the food. There was even a performance. Colton played the piano while Lewis played the violin. They showed their education from music school by playing very well together. Daisy looked over. With Cole's talent, if he became a musician, he would be an outstanding pianist. Freya smiled. I'm sure he has his reasons for choosing whichever path. Daisy nodded. Cole talks a lot of smacks, but he's very responsible. Talking behind my back. Colton suddenly appeared behind them, making them jump. Daisy looked up. Why are you eavesdropping? Colton crossed his arms. I can't hear what you're telling my wife. Daisy replied, you just shouldn't eavesdrop. Nalace, care to say something? Nalace, who was at the pit next to them, raised his brows. Showing your temper at my wife. Daisy raised her brows because Nalace was on her side. Colton chuckled. You're not worth keeping around anymore. Daisy smiled and was smug about it. When Charm gets married one day, she might turn out just like me. Colton didn't know what to say. Freya chuckled. All right, you two are so childish. Riley saw them and couldn't help but smile. I don't know why this reminds me of when they were kids. Maisie was peeling shrimp for Dee and Beatrice when she said, they were cuter when they were kids, huh? Barbara smiled. Beatrice was adorable when she was a baby. Do you think she's cute now? Beatrice frowned. Why am I brought into this? Barbara glared at her. Aren't you ashamed to have Aunt Maisie peel the shrimp for you? Chapter 2709. Beatrice talked back. Daddy was peeling shrimp for you too. You're not ashamed either. Barbara had nothing to say, but Riley and Maisie laughed. The moon hung brightly in the sky. The lights shone around them, and it was a happy scene. After the wedding, Freya brought her daughter and Colton to the Kongports. The father and daughter also went there for vacation. Waylon and Cameron went to Taylorton to learn how to take care of the babies so they wouldn't be flustered when theirs came along. Nalace was a trainee dad, and Waylon was a soon-to-be dad. They were trying to one-up each other. Daisy and Cameron were rendered speechless by their behavior. Cameron asked, have you come up with names for the babies? Daisy shook her head and said, I'm going to call them Tick, Tack, and Toe. Cameron chuckled. Are you going to be so casual about it? She looked serious. It's easy to remember. Cameron's face twitched. You can memorize whole scripts for movies. It's not hard to remember your kids' names, is it? Nalace was carrying the third one and said, she's afraid she might mix up the older and younger ones. Daisy scratched her cheek and smiled awkwardly. Cameron suddenly understood. That's true. They're triplets. They look the same. Waylon smiled. If you ask Cam, she probably can't tell who's who. Cameron frowned. You're underestimating me. Daisy covered her smile. Meanwhile, at Stoslow, Leah walked out of the airport, but it was raining cats and dogs. She dragged her luggage and stood under the awning while going through her phone. She couldn't think of anyone in Stoslow who could come and get her. Did that mean she had to call that man? She thought about it and then dialed his number. Soon after, Morrison picked up. Howdy, I'm in Stoslow, at the airport, but it's raining, so I can't walk around. Do you know anyone who can pick me up? After a few seconds of silence, he said, you're in Stoslow. Yes, I applied for a job with the Foreign Affairs Department and was hired. Wait for me. He hung up. She sat on the bench and waited for about 25 minutes. The heavy rain slowed down, and that was when she suddenly got a call from Morrison, who asked her where she was. She looked at the doors. 13. I'm standing under the flyover. She was afraid that she was too hidden, so she walked outside. She suddenly heard a voice. Where are you heading? Leah paused, then turned around to see Morrison walking over with an umbrella. She was shocked. Why did you? He's back. Morrison handed the umbrella to her and took her luggage. She walked next to him, but the umbrella blocked his eyesight since there was a difference in height. He suddenly stopped and moved the umbrella away. Missy, are you trying to get me killed? Leah awkwardly apologized and raised the umbrella. Let me do that. Morrison took the umbrella and accidentally held her hand. When they touched, their eyes met, and they both froze. He immediately said, I wasn't trying to grab your hand. Leah pulled her hand out. I didn't say you were. Who knows? If you were to scream, I'd be in trouble. Fool me once. Leah didn't know what to say. Chapter 2710. Once Leah got into the car, she buckled her seatbelt. Morrison got in too and drove away. On the way there, Leah looked out the window and didn't speak. Morrison looked at her. You're really trusting. Aren't you worried that I will sell you off? Leah turned to look at him. You wouldn't. How would you know? Don't trust men too much. Including you? Asked Leah. Morrison cleared his throat. You can include me. Leah suddenly laughed. You're friends with Wayne, and that says a lot about you. Besides, you didn't take advantage of me previously, so I trust you. Morrison paused, not ashamed to bring that day up. He had never felt more humiliated than that night. Once she got to the hotel she had booked, Leah suddenly paused while getting out and turned around. Seeing how you picked me up, do you want to grab dinner? Morrison leaned back in his seat. I'll see how things go. Sure. Leah didn't push. She was going to close the door when Morrison suddenly said, I only go to the high-end ones. She paused, then smiled. Deal. After she walked away, Morrison held the steering wheel, looked at his hand, and squinted. Are all women's hands so soft? At the Kong ports, James received a call from an unknown number right after wrapping up the filming for the day. He walked outside his apartment to pick it up. Hello, do you have plans tomorrow, Mr. Tell? When he heard the voice, he remembered who it belonged to. It's you. I'm filming in the Kong ports. Won't be able to make it tomorrow. All right then. Jazelle Peterson hung up. James clicked his tongue and placed his phone down. This woman. Which woman? One of the male actors walked over and placed his hand on his shoulder. Your girlfriend. No. What girlfriend? James didn't want anyone to know that he had a questionable agreement. The actor smiled. You're an actor, not an idol. There's no need to hide your relationship status. Besides, Tenet never said actors can't be in relationships known to the public. James cleared his throat. I'm really single. Don't be nosy. All right. The man didn't push him and left to prepare for his next scene. At the same moment, in the Peterson Manor in Houston, Gordon asked Jazelle, he's filming in the Kong ports. She nodded. I heard that he has a role in Donnie's new film. I guess he will have a bright future, so we should get out of his way. We can meet him after he returns. Gordon didn't mind how Jazelle was in the past. Everyone had their young and reckless days. Her mother, Estelle, walked in with some fruits and sat on the couch. Jazelle, are you really dating that Tell boy? Didn't you just meet not long ago? She didn't really believe it because they progressed too quickly. Gordon looked at his daughter. Jazelle put down her phone and smiled. I'm just trying things out. You both like him too. Gordon looked down. Jazelle, we just want you to have a family of your own, but we don't want you to just find someone to do that with. Jazelle was stunned. She looked down because that was the idea. She had to marry someone in the end anyway. It didn't matter with who. Why not pick a good-looking one who was predictable and didn't mind going on a blind date?